Hello, Mrs. F1.
Hello, Mr. F1.
How are you?
Good. Welcome to the new... We're trying something new, people.
The new setup.
If you watch us on YouTube, we usually are sitting on our sofa at home. We're still at home. That hasn't changed.
Also 5 feet away from our sofa.
Yeah. We've just moved 5 feet over into a more aesthetically pleasing location. We've got some Formula One items. You know, Williams hat, old Formula One book, Ferrari car. You name it, we got it. We're trying to bring you... I almost hit the shelf and it fell over. We're trying to bring you better quality content, people. So
There you go.
Here you are. Here's a shelf.
Take it or leave it.
Anyways, no F1 race, obviously, this week. First off, I feel like I need to apologize. Because if you listened to our episode last week, halfway through, Matt's mic completely just went away. So I apologize, all you guys, on that. We're going to see if we can figure out what went wrong there and maybe upload the episode with his mic full. So
Sounds good.
sorry. We are going to do, for today's episode, you may be wondering, what the heck are you going to talk about? There was no race. There was some news, but not a lot of F1 news. We thought this would be the perfect opportunity because we are all for promoting other forms of racing. And we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to deep dive into F1 Academy.
Yeah.
Because it's starting soon.
It is.
The weekend of April 28th.
Yeah, the weekend of Baku.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about F1 Academy, this is the episode for you. But before we jump into it, I have an exciting announcement. Drum roll, please. Okay, good. Thank you. I have started my own Formula One merch line, specifically for the ladies.
Yep.
Listen, I was just so sick and tired of polos with logos on them and passing that off as female, like, merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no merchandise out there for women. And if you're a woman, you know this. You know there's nothing good out there. And not just nothing good. If you do find something, it's usually like a graphic t-shirt that you really can't wear anywhere else. So we launched, it's called GP Girl. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok at Grand Prix Girl, and our website, grandprixgirl.com. And we launched with our first product, which is a necklace, a pendant that has drivers' names and numbers on them. They're super cool, 18 karat gold plated. But yeah, go check it out. I'm super excited. We've already gotten a lot of love and support from people out there on social media for it. So thank you all if you're one of those people who has already purchased one. But go check it out, grandprixgirl.com. And yeah, It's my own little like plug. Let's get into F1 Academy. Speaking of the ladies, if you're unfamiliar with F1 Academy, it is an all-female racing series. Now, we've talked about it before on this podcast, but there was a all-female series before called W Series, which it's looking like will no longer exist.
There's still no news, right? I
news.
I think people just assume that it's done now, but yeah,
I think so. I went on their website.
upsetting.
Yeah, I know it is sad because it would be cool to have 2 female series. But yeah, I went on their website the other day and like there's literally nothing posted. So F1 Academy looks like they're going to be the only female racing series out there. We were both very excited when it was announced. And I know details have been like slowly trickling out about this series and what it'll be. So let's kind of get into what F1 Academy is and like the goal of F1 Academy. So it's a racing category. They're specifically from their website. It says it's a racing category designed to give and prepare women and give them access, female drivers access to the fundamental levels of experience needed to progress into F3 and forward. So obviously the goal here is very much so to give them opportunities, but also prepare them for the future, which I think is what W Series was really missing.
Yeah. Well, W Series, in my opinion, was just missing F1's, affiliation. Right now, F1 Academy is obviously affiliated with F1, and there's big names involved with it, like Susie Wolf is the CEO, or whoever is it CEO?
She's the managing director.
Managing director. I think, it'll be good to have that. It seems like it's kind of like an F4. It's like just slightly under F3, but it will be only women drivers. So hopefully it'll funnel more women into F3 because, as of right now, there's only been, I can only think of 2 women that were in the junior series recently, which was Sophia's in F3 right now, and Tatiana Calderon was in F2 for a little bit, and I think she's now back at IndyCar.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure about that.
But yeah, it'll be a good way to funnel more women into F3.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because actually F1 did publish like their funnel of how like where this F1 Academy sits, because we all know there's very much like a ladder to climb. F4, F3, F2, and then F1. This F1 Academy is sitting like right below F3. And we'll get into a little bit more as to why that is. But the idea, I think, is to like start them there. They're not starting totally at the bottom of the totem pole, but a lot of the women that have been named racers in this series do have quite a bit of racing experience, not just in the Formula Series, but other series as well. So we'll dive into that. But yeah, I think it's just exciting too to see F1 putting their money where their mouth is on this. And really being like, okay, we're not just going to give you like a car to race in and a platform to do that. We're going to prepare you for what you need to go into the future, which I think is what W Series is missing. And also F3 just in general, like it was just hard for women to kind of like breach that gap. So yeah, really encouraging things. And I think like the structure is good. Like it's solid. It's a great place to start. The car, this is what I was like, a lot like super interested in was, okay, like what kind of car are these girls going to be driving? They're giving something like super wimpy. And I did take a look. I did a little research on this, hence my like notebooks here on my lap, like such a nerd. But the car is really interesting because I took a look at the W Series spec car that they were running, and I took a look at the Formula 3 spec car and like where this car is going to fall. So it's a 4-cylinder turbo 1.4 liter engine. It's going to put out about 174 horsepower. And I think the interesting thing about this is the W Series car, the engine in that car is very similar, 4-cylinder 1.4 liter, but it put out 270 horsepower. So significantly less powerful car, which is interesting compared to W Series.
That's really, I don't know how you can get 100 more horsepower with the same amount of cylinders and volume, piston volume. I can't comprehend that, but I'm not an engineer.
According to the W Series website.
Yeah, I know it's significantly, I don't want to say significantly, but I know it's slower than the F3 car. And that's how obviously the series are made. It's the same thing. It's probably very similar to an F4 car in that, you kind of work your way up. And I think last I checked that the F2 car is still the second fastest car in the world.
I think you're right, yeah.
It's just a bit quicker than an Indy car, and that with obviously F1 car being significantly the fastest car in the world.
Right.
But yeah, it makes sense that it's less powerful than the F3 cars. It just sounds like if that number is true, that's pretty significantly slower than the W Series car, which will be a challenge for some of the W Series drivers that have moved to F1 Academy to be in a significantly slower car.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a bit interesting to me to see how much less powerful this car is they're giving them to compared to the W Series, because, well, like I mentioned before, we'll get into it a little bit later, but there are a lot of women from the W Series that have jumped ship and gone to F1 Academy. Yep. So the top speed of the car is supposedly to go 149 miles an hour, 240 kilometers for all of our friends across the pond.
Well, anyone outside of the United States.
Yeah, basically. And then it's supposed to do 0 to 100 in about 3.6 seconds. So
that's still absurdly fast.
Yeah, still quick.
0 to 100 kph or 0 to 100 miles per hour?
I believe that's miles per hour.
Like Ferraris go that fast.
Right. Teslas go that fast.
Well, Tesla's a little faster.
So I went and looked at the specs of an F3 car because obviously if these women succeed, that's where they'll
that's the
hopefully be
goal.
moving to.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, how big is the gap between there? So an F3 car, its top speed is around 186 miles per hour, 300 kilometers.
That's really fast.
0 to 103.1 seconds.
Okay.
And then it's a 6-cylinder, 3.4 liter, 380 horsepower.
That's a big jump.
Significantly a lot more than the 174 horsepower. So quite a big jump in performance there if you were to go from Academy to F3.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't think that's a smart move. And I don't know enough about F4. Maybe this car is similar enough to all the other F4 cars that it's no different if they were in Spanish F4 and jumped to F3, but that seems like a huge jump. So, if the goal is to feed these women into F3, they may be doing them a disservice by giving them a slower car.
Yeah. And I think obviously it's the first year this series is ever running.
Yeah.
So it will obviously
They can
evolve as it goes forward. This is their first inaugural class to go through this. So
Right.
I'm really interested to your point, like the W Series car is putting out 270 horsepower. I feel like that's a good midpoint between that car and an F3 car. Like it's not a crazy amount more horsepower and speed, but it's definitely more to where it's a learning adjustment, for sure. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see. Yeah. And I mean, I know like a lot of the times like car specs are really hard for people to like wrap their heads around, especially if you're not a car person in general. But I think it's important to know because especially with this new series, I think it's so important to educate yourself and like have our eyes on it and pay attention to it because if we want it to succeed, we need to give it just as much effort and attention as we would Formula One. And I feel like there are people out there who know like the top speed of the Aston Martin in 2020. Well, it wasn't even Aston Martin at that point, I don't think, but you know what I mean? Like there's all these facts and stats. So interesting to see how it stacks up to the car they're supposed to be leading to. All right. How do the teams work? And this I think is really interesting because I feel like this differs quite a bit from some other series. So there are 5 total teams in the series currently right now for the first season. And there are 3 drivers per team. And the teams are teams that their names are very familiar to.
If you watch F3 and F2.
Yeah, if you have watched F3 and F2, which I think is great because I feel like that makes it like this level playing field in a way. Like these girls are getting the attention and the help from the same teams the guys are getting the attention and help.
It should help them feed their way up, right?
Yeah.
They would have a recognizable team if they were to move to F3.
Yeah. So these are the 5 teams. It's Campos Racing.
Campos,
sorry. MP Motorsport, Art Grand Prix, Rodin Carlin.
ART, I think they call it.
ART or Art Grand Prix. Rodin Carlin and Prima Racing.
So that's the big 5 in F3 and F2. I mean, Prema's the most well known. They have ties with Ferrari, I believe, because they're Italian. Pretty sure Charles went through Prema and
his little brother's with them now.
Yes,
They've
F2,
produced
correct.
some great drivers.
And again, you have to keep in mind that the cars are standardized, so teams aren't too important. Because MP Motorsport won the Constructors' Championship last year in F2. That's because Felipe Drugovich drove for MP, and obviously the driver who wins the individual drivers' championship helps the team score a lot of points. And MP, they weren't very well known as kind of a team to run the gamut. But to get back to what you were saying, it's interesting. They have the similar setup to F3 in which they have 3 drivers per team. F3 has 10 teams, so that's why there's 30 drivers on the grid, which is madness.
Right.
I think it's too many drivers.
A lot less teams than F1 Academy.
Yeah, exactly. But who knows if if the first season goes well, I would assume some of the other teams that aren't on that list, VAR, High Tech, I would think they would jump, and as long as there's funding there,
Yeah.
if F1 is subsidizing, I would think that some of these teams would try and make the jump to support some of these drivers. So
Yeah, I agree. And like my comment earlier about like they're getting the same help from the same teams and companies the men are too. I think it helps, like their experience is going to be similar to that of the guys, which I think helps prepare them. But also these teams have experience, like taking drivers, cultivating their talent and moving them forward, which I think is what W Series was sorely missing.
Right.
Not just the fact that the people participating to help these drivers like succeed weren't in any way, shape, or form like bigger teams that were involved in other series, but also the fact that this gives these women access to other paddocks. They get to attend F3. I've already seen a couple of the girls on social media doing other things. Obviously, these teams have facilities, large facilities, and with these girls can go and do simulator work and work with people who have been in F1 and F2 and F3. And with W Series, not only did they not have the personnel there really, and the big name teams there to help these girls, they also had no connection to any other racing series outside of their own. And it just kind of made them like this little island off to the side where, okay, sure, we can provide a racetrack and cars for these girls to get out there and show what they can do. But I mean, I don't mean to put W Series down. I think it really had good intentions, but I just don't think it was enough.
Right. Like, it was cool that, there was a recognizable name in W Series like Jenner Racing, but at the end of the day, they're not Jenner Racing, as cool as that name is. Like, they aren't as experienced as ART.
No, they're brand
and Prema, and these teams that, like you said, they've been doing it for a while. So that experience should make things very different for the better.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's going to open a lot of doors for these girls in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're associated with a lot of these, teams and companies, getting sponsorships is a heck of a lot easier when you have a connection.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, it's great to see. I'm glad to see that these teams have stepped up and done it, first of all. And I'm just excited that that's part of this, which I think is a huge key to making it successful. Okay, so let's get into the actual racing. There are 7 races, which they're calling rounds.
Yes.
In an entire season. And all of these rounds take place at a different location. So 7 race weekends, 7 different locations around the world. They will not be alongside Formula One for all these races. Only one, which is their final race of the season in Austin, Texas. But they did just announce, I know people were really puzzled because when the schedule came out, they were like, why are you guys not racing next to Formula One? Like, why are you guys not doing that? But actually, just 2 weeks ago, week ago, it was announced that in 2024, F1 Academy will be racing alongside the Formula One calendar, which is great.
Yeah, it's going to make that weekend insanely busy because think about it, there's 3 feeder series and F1 going on every weekend that F1 Academy is there. Like that is a lot of racing that they're going to have to pack in.
I have a feeling the reason they didn't do it this year was if you've ever been to a Formula One race, there's a bunch of other racing going on those tracks a lot of the time. Ferrari Challenge, Nissan Cup, sometimes other forms of Porsche Super Cup. So my feeling was this year they just could not slot it in with all those other racing. So I have a feeling some of those other races will get the boot.
For sure.
And
they
replaced.
will. And it's a no-brainer for F1 because F1 Academy is affiliated with F1.
Okay. And it's great because they'll be in the paddock with F1 teams, which is fantastic. They're going to get the exposure of the crowd, being actually able to watch them. Hopefully they'll have promotional things on the campus. So just more visibility for them in 2024. But just for 2023, they will only have that one race.
Yep, in Austin.
So, the race weekends are complicated. We've just discovered this even further because I had something written down originally and we just looked and it wasn't correct. It was a little off.
Yeah.
So I'll let you walk us through what a F1 Academy race weekend looks like?
So they haven't really said what is going to correlate with what specific dates. I mean, to me, it seems like they need 3 days to do all the things that they want to do, but supposedly on the calendar, it's only 2 days.
Yeah.
So we'll just assume that it's 2 days. My guess is that the first day will have a free practice, it'll have a qualifying session, and it'll have 2 races, which is madness. The 2 races, one is a feature race, and that order will be set just by qualifying.
Right.
The second race will be a sprint race, shortened, and a reverse grid.
Okay.
Similar
to F2.
Similar to the feeder series, yes, exactly. And then it sounds like there's going to be a second day that has a free practice, another qualifying session, and then a final race. And that race is going to be just a regular feature race. It's just everybody's going to have a second shot at qualifying well in another race.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about this jam-packed format?
If it's over 3 days, I don't think it's an issue. If it's 2 days, I don't understand how they're going to do all of that. That's very intense. The qualifying sessions are only 15 minutes.
Yeah, they're pretty short.
So that it's pretty short. The sprint race is 20 minutes, feature race 30 minutes. So the races themselves aren't that long, but I mean, if there's safety cars, if there's whatever,
right.
It's a lot of racing. But it should be good experience for the women who are in the series, because they are going to get, even though it's 7 rounds, they're doing 21 races and 14 qualifying sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot.
Getting your bang for your buck.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And just want to preface, there is not a ton of detailed information out. You can go on F1 Academy's Instagram, and they kind of have this infographic chart explaining what a race weekend looks like, but even the infographic is unclear.
Very confusing, yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely a little different. They're definitely pulling in elements of the Formula Series that are above them, which I think is good. It'll give these women a chance to understand how a weekend like that works and what it feels like as a driver to go through all those stages during a weekend.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, really interesting format and excited to see it in person.
Well, and I think that F1 Academy is seeing the success of F3 and F2 with those race formats, because I don't know if anyone's ever watched F3 or F2 races. They're madness. I mean, it's like
they're insanity.
Nonstop action because the cars are so standardized. It's every single lap somebody's battling somebody. Like if you want to watch really tight racing, F2 and F3 provide that way more than F1 does.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, a lot going on there. But, I mean, these women will definitely get experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'll have a lot of racing experience.
Yeah,
that's for
no
sure.
one can complain that they didn't drive enough. That's for sure.
Yep.
Unless you just crash every time. Then that's the thing. Okay, let's get into kind of the last breakdown portion of F1 Academy, which is the drivers, which I think everyone is really, really excited about. A lot of familiar names. If you paid attention to W Series, a lot of familiar names of women outside of W Series, and then some new faces. So it really does seem like F1 made a huge effort into kind of like pulling from every part of the pond. They didn't just look at girls with experience. There's actually some girls in here that have never done single-seater racing at all, which is pretty crazy, but... Actually, I shouldn't say that.
It's not. It's not crazy because F4 is the first series of single-seater racing. Everything before that is karting.
Yeah.
So if this series is on par with F4, which it seems like it is, then that would make sense that there's women who don't have experience yet in single-seater racing.
Right. And it happens all the time.
Just be a killer in karting,
Right. And it happens all the time with male drivers. Like some guys get plucked immediately from karting and put into like something else that's a little bit. Max Verstappen is like the perfect example of that.
Well, Max jumped from GP3 to F1, but I mean, everybody at some point jumps from karts to single seaters, right? It's just a matter of when. I don't think it's very often that male drivers go from karts to F3. I could be wrong, but from when I started following, the majority of the drivers are coming from F4 series or Formula Renault.
Right.
kind of the local series all over the globe, and that's their first taste of single seaters before they jump to F3.
Yeah. There's also some really young women in here as well, as also with some women who are, I guess you could call older in racing terms.
Can't be as old as Roy Nissany in F2.
So yeah, it was interesting to see. And also when you look at how, like, who they chose on each one of these teams, you can kind of see the teams taking a strategy of maybe like picking a younger person and then pairing them with maybe an older, more experienced female driver. When I was going through all these drivers and kind of like making notes about each of them, kind of looks like every team has kind of taken that. No one has gone and just taken like 3 incredibly young girls and just like threw them in that team. They're kind of, it seems like everyone was really smart in, you know, getting someone with a little bit more experience and then maybe having another girl or two that really doesn't have a whole ton, has just been in karting or something like that. And I'm already going to say, I apologize in advance for butchering all these names.
Yep.
I don't want to hear comments on our stinking social media. I get it. No one can pronounce all these names correctly. And if you can, congrats. You're probably seated on the right hand of God. Okay, so Campos. We have Nyara Marte.
Okay.
She is 21 years old. We have Lola. This last name is a kicker because I just kind of love this. Lovenfoss.
Sounds French.
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Ding, ding, ding. Congrats. And then we have Maddie. It's almost spelled like Maddie. Maddie Caceres. And she is 19.
And assuming Spanish?
I think so, yes. I didn't write down all their nationalities. Okay. But yeah, so we got a 21-year-old, 17-year-old, and a 19-year-old.
Okay.
So all pretty, younger. I'm just kind of looking. Niera was in W Series. So if that name sounds familiar, it should be. She was in the 2021. She actually came in 4th in the W Series standings. And she was in Spanish F4 and actually had some podium success there.
Nice.
So that's really good. Maddie was in F4 also, and she is a USF. She was also raced in the USF Juniors in the United States in 2022, which I thought was cool. And then Lola was also involved in Spanish F4. So we have some women who have performed in kind of like that tier, those categories that are right below F3. So all these women seem to have a decent amount of, experience there. Then we have the team MP Motorsport. This team has 2 drivers that I think we were both really excited to see. We've actually been kind of knew about them, following them for a little bit. They are sisters, which is crazy. We have Hamda. We have Hamda Al-Khabasi and her sister Ama. Hamda is 21. Ama is 23. So close in age. And these 2 ladies have been out there driving for quite a bit.
Yeah, they are Emirati.
Yes. And we'll go into the details about them because interesting stuff going on there. And then we have Emily De Hayes.
Yeah.
She is 20. So again, everyone's relatively early 20s there. Oldest on that team, 23 years old. So still relatively young.
Hamda's 23 years old.
Yes, she is.
Wow.
So like you mentioned, the Al-Khabasi sisters are Arab Emirates, UAE, born and raised. Amna actually was the first Middle Eastern woman to test in Formula E. I remember seeing this a bit last year. They made a really big deal out of it, as they should have, especially because not only because she's a woman, but she is Arab and coming from a country where women weren't allowed to drive cars until a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And
this woman is out here driving a race car on a track with other men, and it just was fantastic. It was really good to see. So fun fact about her. She also raced in F3 Asia and then Formula 4 UAE. And Italian F4.
Oh yeah, they are probably the most experienced of all the drivers.
They've bounced around.
Yeah.
And then Hamda was the first woman to be on a podium in the Italian F4 series.
Good for her.
So they definitely have a bunch of accolades under their belt when it comes to being the first to things, which is really great. The interesting thing and the tea we're going to get into about these sisters, which we just recently found out about. So obviously, you have to have money to be in motorsport. So we were like, this is interesting. Not only are they women in a country where, you know, women's rights isn't necessarily a priority, where they're kind of treated as second-class citizens in certain places. We were like, okay, so how did they get to where they are now? Like, what, you know, did they have funding? Who was backing them? Well, this is where things get a little fishy. Their dad's in jail. And I know you read more about this. He kind of took a lot of money.
Yeah, apparently he was the president of a petroleum company in UAE, which, you know, is where the majority of the money is in the Middle East. And yeah, I believe he's in jail for the next 15 years for bribery and corruption, something like that.
Yeah. You put it lightly. You said a little bit of money.
Oh yeah, it was like billions.
It was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. And he like stashed it in the Cayman Islands or something.
Yeah.
Well, this is all allegedly, right? I mean, well, actually, if he's in jail, I guess it's not allegedly. But yeah. So to your point, there's a lot of people in racing that have their money from unsavory places.
Yeah.
And, you know, sins of the father. I don't really think these two girls can be blamed for the fact that their father may have made some, you know, bad decisions, but clearly his money was able to help them kind of bounce around to different series and get more experience.
Not just his money, his position
Sure.
in life. And again, this is the world of the rich and famous, and also just racing. It's who you know, who you are, and what kind of power you have. I just think it's interesting that they already come from a really controversial place just because of their women from the Middle East. And then they've got this kind of like background behind them that I had no idea about. But like you said, sins of the father. I don't think these girls were involved in any of this.
They aren't at fault at all, obviously, but it's just that some of their experience, you have to understand that there are drivers out there, men and women, who get more experience than others because of the money they have backing them.
Yeah.
That's why I made the joke earlier about Roy Nassani, who is an Israeli driver in F2, and he's like 27 years old, which is significantly older than everybody else in F2. And he still sticks around because he brings a lot of money to the table.
Yeah.
And not that I'm not saying these girls aren't good drivers. Clearly they have good accolades if one of them, you know, finished on the podium in F4. But some of that experience for sure comes down to having the money to be able to fund that racing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not discrediting any of their hard work they've put in over the years. They're both young girls who have shown, you know, promise in other series. I do find it interesting though that like it just so happened both daughters got into F1 Academy with the same team.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a interesting.
I'm sure their money had something to do with it, but I'm excited to just see them put their skills to the test because clearly they have talent.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't buy talent.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So yeah, I mean, I wish them all the best, and if they are really able to like succeed and just grow as drivers and make it up the ladder, I can't imagine what that will do to encouraging young Arab women who will see them and say, hey, maybe I can do that too. Which is really, really
absolutely
great. We've talked a lot about them, but obviously they have Emily on the team as well. She also might sound familiar because she participated in W Series. She also was in Formula 4 UAE alongside both of these young women, and was also in the Spanish Formula 4. So she's got some Formula Series experience there as well. And another W Series driver jump on the fence. All right, we have ART next. We have Lena Buller, who is 25 years old. Carrie Schringer? Shit.
Schreier.
Schreiner.
Schreiner.
We have Carrie Schreiner. She's 24 years old. And Chloe Grant, who's 17.
That sounds familiar. She was in W Series, right?
Chloe Grant was not
No.
in W Series. But I think her name just sounds familiar. Every time I hear, like, I don't know why, but when I heard her name, Chloe Grant, I just thought of Adam Sandler in one of his movies. He goes, Cary Grant. Like, it just
I don't
came to my
remember
mind.
that.
Okay. But yeah, so it's what I think is really interesting about this team is they've got two older drivers, Lena and Carrie, 25 and 24. And we'll get into their experience in a second. But then Chloe, who is 17 years old. That's pretty young. She is one of the youngest drivers on the F1 Academy grid this year. She is being touted as one of the up-and-coming talents for racing, just in general. There's a lot of hype around her, I feel. She's younger. She participated in a couple of the FIA events where they evaluate some of these young drivers' skills. And she apparently was listed as one of the top and up-and-coming talents when she went through all those tests and everything. So I think it's also really exciting because she will probably be one of the first women to go through the F1 Academy category as a young driver. I think as this category grows and gets older, we'll start seeing younger girls, just like you do in F3, F2. Like everyone's around like a similar age. The fact that there are women in here that are 25 years old, you would never see that.
It's rare. Like I said, Roy Nassani is an example, but yeah, majority of F3 drivers are 17.
Right.
You know.
So I think she'll be one of the first kind of like real true talents to start at a young age to go through kind of, you know, this Academy series, which is exciting.
Yeah.
'Cause when you're that young, you really are able to start, you're just developing your talent really. So F1 Academy will be able to help her in a big way in that way. But I found it interesting. Like I said, she's paired with Lena and Carrie on this ART team, which are much older drivers. Carrie is incredibly experienced. And she might sound familiar because she's won a couple of things in other series. So just to go through some of the things she's been involved with, categories or series of racing: F4, GT, endurance racing, and she won the 24-hour SP8 class race. She's also raced in a bunch of other series and races. It's pretty impressive. She's had a pretty impressive career. And I think ART was smart to have two more experienced drivers paired with a very young driver here. They're going to be able to help her a lot when it comes to just fundamentals. And then Lena, too, she was in the Spanish F4 and Formula Regional. So Chloe will be able to learn from some of the more older, experienced, successful drivers, women drivers out there, which is great. Two more teams, almost there. We have Rodin, which has...
Everyone calls him Carlin. Like
Carlin.
Carlin Racing. That's who Logan raced for.
No.
Too. Carlin.
Rodin, Carlin, however you like to pronounce it.
Everyone just calls it Carlin.
Carlin.
Yeah.
But they have one of my favorite drivers that I'm super excited for. Abby Poling, who's 19 years old. Jessica Edgar, who's 17, and Megan Glix, who's 23. Abby had an amazing performance in W Series.
Finishing second, right?
Yeah, and she has also been touted as one of the younger talents. She has been on the podium in every series she has ever raced in her life. I mean, she's only 19, but still, that's pretty impressive. Yeah. And granted, all the series she's participated in besides W Series were all with guys. And she's gotten a podium in every single one. And Megan also was a W Series driver as well. So they know each other. I'm sure that'll be nice to have like a fellow driver that you worked with before working on a team together. Because in W Series, you weren't on teams really.
Right.
So they'll be there. Megan also has a really outstanding racing record. She is second overall in the Canadian Formula 1200, which is pretty great. And she's GP for UK, and she has 2 wins in that series. So again, like she's 23 years old. She's a bit older, but definitely has experience in other forms of racing and had success there. Oh, and another thing to note, Abby is also part of this really big push from Alpine, the Race Her initiative, and she is actually part of the Alpine Academy.
I didn't know that. I thought she was part of Aston Martin.
No, you're thinking of probably Jessica Hawkins.
Yes, I am. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Abby Pulling too, like one of the, I believe she's the only girl on the grid. Don't quote me on that, on this F1 Academy grid that is actually backed by a Formula One team, which is fantastic. And I think smart on their part. So hopefully maybe we'll see more of that as some of these girls just continue with F1. Last but not least, we got Prima. Chloe Chong, who's 15
Wow.
years old. Marta Garcia, who's 23, and another W Series driver, Bianca Bustamante, which she was a rookie in W Series last year, and I really, really liked her as well. Was excited to see her race, but she didn't have such a fantastic start in W Series. And Bianca is also racing Formula 4 in UAE. Formula 4 UAE. Chloe is the youngest driver on the grid for F1 Academy. And she's another one of those talents that has just kind of been, people have been building a lot of hype around. They think she's got a lot of possibilities. She also went through the FIA's Girls on Track event, the same one that Chloe Grant went through. And I believe Jessica Edgar as well went through, where they evaluate your skills, and she scored very high as well. So that's really exciting. And it's really all the Marta, she's also W Series. And also,
her.
Also one of the only girls on the grid that's participated in esports racing in a competitive fashion. So I found that interesting. She's like, can we make her like the Lando Norris of F1 Academy?
I'll be interested to see. I wonder who the favorite is. I would think it would be Abby.
I think Abby, yeah.
But I would really like to see this 15-year-old. I assume she's just coming from karting. So this will probably be her first experience in single-seater racing. So
yeah, I think Chloe Chong and Jessica Edgar are the only two girls that are coming directly from karting, which is interesting because when it comes to experience, those two are going to have the least amount in a single series.
But typically, people in F4, there is no single seater before F4. So you're coming from karting.
Yeah.
So, like you said, right now with F1 Academy, there's a lot more experience. But I would think as the series ages, it will get younger, and there will be a lot more girls who are coming straight from karting.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll start looking more like the F2 and F3 age-wise.
It'll look like F4.
Yeah.
It'll look like the F4 series that happens now all around the world.
So this is a question I had, and as we were going through this list of drivers and I was naming off their ages, it kind of popped into my head. Like you just mentioned, when you're in F4, F3, F2, everyone's kind of around the same age. There aren't these large age gaps. It happens every once in a while, like you mentioned, Roy Nissany. But everyone's a couple of years, within each other. We've got crazy age ranges and experience ranges in this. So the youngest being 15 and the oldest being 25. Do you think that's fair?
I don't see why not. I mean, in F1, we have, who's the youngest driver? Nick or Logan, probably, 22. And Fernando's 41.
Yeah, but that's to me, that's at the pinnacle. Like that is the last stop. So that makes sense to me. But when you look at all the feeder series, you don't have that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the idea is you're competing with people that are around the same talent, amount of talent
Experience.
and age. Exactly. Yeah. What I'm trying to get at is it fair? Like you have, when you're in F2 and F3, you're racing around people who are around the same age as you with around the same amount of experience and talent. And with F1 Academy, we've got women who have raced in multiple different racing series. And then we've got girls that have raced in karting.
Well, I mean, I think there's two answers to that. There's the one that this is a new series and they just had to do that. If they could have all the drivers be 16 years old jumping from karting to F4 or to F1 Academy, then they would, but they just don't have that option right now. And then the second thing is that there are examples of it in other series of racing. Like I said, Roy Nissany's been in F2 for like 5 years, and that hasn't helped him. He hasn't won. He hasn't come close to winning. So at the end of the day, talent still wins.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's interesting, like you said, as it gets older, we'll probably see more girls and more talent making F1 Academy like their goal. So it'll be interesting to see how it grows. And it'll be interesting to see how these women race alongside each other with varying ages and different experience. So I'm also interested to see how that plays out on track.
That happened in W Series last year.
Yeah.
There was a wide range of ages and experience. So I don't think it'll be too much different from that kind of racing.
Yeah, that's true. All right, that is our F1 Academy breakdown. It was a lot of info. We appreciate you sticking with us, but we want to give this series a shot. We want to give it the attention it deserves because we believe women belong in motorsports, not just as drivers, but also in other capacities. And we want to be one of the shows out there promoting it for sure. So we're excited to watch. A quick note, there has been no official announcement as to where you'll be able to watch Academy. I actually just talked to somebody who talked to one of the girls racing in the Academy series, Chloe Grant, and she was like, we don't even know where you could watch it or where that might be. They're supposedly maybe having it available on F1 TV.
That's what I was told. That should be the case if F1 is supporting it.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for them not to put the races on F1 TV.
So hopefully they'll have it somewhere. If not there, hopefully YouTube at least or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it just makes sense. But keep your eye out for any of that. We encourage you to go follow them on Instagram at F1 Academy. And thanks for joining us again for another episode. And as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and give us a 5-star stinking review because we work hard and we don't get paid for any of this. So, and as always, too, make sure to go check out the merch shop at grandprixgirl.com and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. But until next week, you guys, we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.